Okay, good afternoon. This is Richard Hsu, host of Hsu Untied. This afternoon, I'm really pleased to have with me as my guest Kelly Fair, who's a partner at Dentons. Kelly, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Richard. I'm really happy to be here.
So, Kelly, let me start by asking you. You have a very interesting background, having been a partner at a law firm and then going off and being the general counsel of a canopy growth company. So, I wanted to ask you a little bit about how did that opportunity present itself, and why did you decide to do it?
Sure. So reeling the tape kind of way back, I was with Dentons from 2013 pretty much on. And in 2014, right after I joined the firm as an associate lateral, I approached the firm about starting the U.S. cannabis group at Dentons in Big Law, which could have been career suicide, but luckily Dentons was receptive to the business case. At the time, we had about 30 lawyers in Canada running full time because cannabis had legalized federally there.
Hmm.
Um, so the firm supported me even as an associate, connected me with our healthcare group in Chicago, my partner, Katie Ashton. They were doing some of the early deal work in the US around the cannabis industry.
Hmm.
And they let us start and they supported us through the Office of General Counsel and all of the non-sexy things you have to do in Big Law to get something done like that.
Oh.
And off we went. In 2016, Canopy Growth Corporation, which was the largest at the time in Canada and the world, they were having a ton of trouble getting big firm help south of the border in the US. And so they came to me and I said, well, I'm on the conflicts clearance committee, so we can do this for you. So that's when the relationship with Canopy Growth started. And then in 2018, I guess I should say from that point further or going forward, my mandate for Canopy was to find US market entry opportunities that were federally legal. Canopy was publicly listed on the NYSE at the time and the TSX. And so they had to stay publicly or federally legal. In 2018, Constellation Brands and Big Alcohol did a $5 billion investment into the company. So even more critical that we not lose those licenses. And so then in 2018, when the 2018 Farm Bill legalized hemp as a commodity, Canopy approached me to ask if I would be the U.S. General Counsel as they were going to launch in the U.S. With a federally legal hemp operation.
Hmm.
So we launched the Martha Stewart CBD brands and a whole host of other brands. And yeah, it was a very interesting, bumpy, fun road. We were kind of, they say, like flying the plane as you're building it.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but that's the opportunity. That's how it came to me.
Let me
Um,
ask you, what when you said you wanted to start the canopy cannabis practice as a first year associate, what made you even think of that as an idea?
so, and I, to be fair, I was a lateral, so I was
Okay.
more seasoned than a first. That would have
Okay.
been pretty interesting. Um, so what brought it to me was when I came out of law school, I had colleagues coming out of grad school in the nonprofit space, and
Hmm.
some of them went into lobbying in California. And then a few of them, more than a few, went into cannabis advocacy
Hmm.
and did the referendums in Colorado that legalized. You worked on California's failed referendum. And so in 2013, 14, right when Alaska, Oregon, and Washington, D.C. legalized, I approached those friends who I'd been supporting over, I think had been practicing for 7 years at the time, to
Hmm.
say, okay, so what's the deal? What's coming up in the 2016 ballot? California's referendum doesn't have a real shot this time. And so I had a lot of political intel of how strong of a business case I could make to the firm so
Hmm.
that I could go to the firm. At the time, I think there was maybe 9 medical states plus Guam. Guam was very important for my business case and said, but in 2016, we're expecting California to legalize. We're expecting all of these states to fall.
Hmm.
And that's what gave me the idea.
Hmm.
And then Dentons has a very great public policy bench of lobbyists that are bipartisan. So I ran the idea on the Dem side and the Republican side just to see if they looked at me like I was crazy, and they didn't. They thought we are at a firm that says they're a challenger brand and an innovator, so let's put that to the test. And they
Oh.
supported me.
That's pretty amazing. So when Canopy Growth asked you to be the U.S. General Counsel, was that a easy decision, a tough decision? Were you thinking you wanted to go in-house? Tell me what that
Oh,
was like.
could not have been tougher. So the lineup was, so I cut teeth in law and regulatory and litigation. I was a trial lawyer. I argued appeals. I just finished a trial to successful completion while running the cannabis group. And my partners knew, okay, at the end of 2018, Kelly's going to focus on cannabis full time. I also made partner in 2018. So it all the Canopy asked to come in to be GC was at the same time I made partner. So I worked
Oh,
for 10 years in big law, like got my partnership stripes, and then was asked to come in. So the timing was tricky. Like I could have just continued on, but I also saw the business opportunity to really be at the bleeding edge of an industry that's not cannabis. Like this was hemp and this was federally legal. And so
hmm.
it was my mandate was to do all public policy with our GR team that was getting CBD regulated, get cannabis legalized, and then commercially get to launch all of these products
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
be
Hmm.
really, I think it's very rare when the lawyers are so instrumental in moving both top and bottom line because I
Yeah.
had to talk to every distributor, every company that was working with us to say, no, hemp is federally legal, but it's not cannabis. And here's why your Martha Stewart's going to be great on your shelves. So it was that opportunity was just too juicy for me to not take.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, how did you like being the general counsel, being in-house? I mean, it's not for everyone, but did it suit you well?
It suited me well. I'll say once you drop the business of a law firm from your practice, I'm sure you've had this experience and others, you free up a lot of time. You don't realize how much time and energy it takes to be a great firm associate, managing senior and partner. And once that's gone, and if you're clicked into a business that you're passionate about, it's just infinite amount of energy and resources you can spend
Mm,
on that company's problem. And for me, it
mm,
was the whole cannabis industry and hemp and what Canopy wanted to accomplish.
mm,
And that suited me perfectly. I had to make sure I didn't burn out, certainly. And like all the work life balance, I had to put it back in place. And then I'd say where I loved it the most was the exposure to the business.
mm.
And it being a truly business minded lawyer is something I think we all try to accomplish in private practice or otherwise. And my ability to have constant contact with the C-suite. I was in charge of global M&A, so I was working with the CFO day in, day out on all the deals that we did in the US, having exposure to like the sales organization, the chief commercial officer, the chief growth officer, to see like really what can stall a business, what hurdles legal can put in place without even knowing it. There was that. And then also with just executives and boards, like getting that sort of exposure. And then by the end, for every problem you have or everything you're doing, you've got this like 360 mindset of like, okay, how is this moving every piece of the organization's ball forward? Or how is it not? And if not, like maybe we should rethink how we do it. So
Yeah,
that it was an invaluable experience. Coming back into private practice, like I'll never see things the same way. I
yeah.
feel like I'm 500 times more effective probably than I was even as a very well-trained, polished firm lawyer.
Were you the first lawyer to join them or not?
In the US, yes.
Okay.
And
Uh-huh.
so I built a team in the US under me,
Uh-huh.
and I joined a Canadian team that was already pretty big. I mean, they'd been in Canada running since 2010. So,
Interesting.
but the
So
US was ours.
what made you decide to go back to private practice? Sounds like you were really enjoying it. You talk a lot about the things you were doing there. It sounds very exciting. What made you decide to go back to private practice?
Well, it was by virtue of a novel deal that I was at the forefront of constructing. So, with cannabis legalization trailing in the US, or I should take a step back. So, having to stay federally legal and being in charge of the certs, if you're doing M&A in the US and buying cannabis companies, you can't directly buy, you can't directly invest into cannabis companies. There's all sorts of AML violations that come along with that now. So what Canopy did, and this is all part of the public record, is we used options and warrants and other kind of conditional purchasing structures. And so we had this great, string of pearls in the US that spanned the country and had all of the form factors, but Canopy couldn't close on any of those deals. And so we decided to enact a construct to put a holding company over those assets called Canopy USA. We reorganized it, and they asked if I wanted to be the general counsel of Canopy USA. I said I did, certainly, but I wanted to make sure that I had the right team under me, which was the Dentons Cannabis Group, and it cut off my direct exposure to the illegal operations too by going back through Dentons. And Dentons was again stepped up to do a novel deal with me to let me come back in, knowing that I was going to devote a lot of time to Canopy USA and its assets. And we're still working to close that deal, and so far it's worked out. It's been also great to diversify the practice and see what else is going out there. Before cannabis, I also worked in all kinds of growth industries. I was in autonomous vehicles, some crypto, some gaming. So I've got to be back in that fold, which you don't get if you're in-house. You're really just focused on one mandate, one
Yeah,
agenda.
totally. I was just going to ask you, so what other industries and companies are you working with now?
So autonomous vehicles are certainly interesting. I did some very early work in that space, and I've had wonderful contacts go out into the companies that we see in the Bay Area. So working with them, working with a gaming company that's got some crypto components that's interesting, and also some just very interested in vertical farming. I mean, I've got kind of an ag bent now that I think Canopy planted and grew like 7,000 acres of hemp. So I'm very interested in the ag space. So vertical farming is interesting to me. Anything that's a disruptor that also saves resources. I mean, ultimately, I feel like the work I do in cannabis and hemp, it will make the world better. I mean, I know that sounds maybe a little Pollyannish, but I do want to make an impact now that I've had an opportunity to. So
Yeah.
anything where I'm making an impact.
How do you feel? You feel good about being back in private practice? Feels good? Like you never left, or what would you say?
It does feel good. The Dentons family has been great. When I left Dentons Cannabis Group, I'll start with the Cannabis Group. We had recruited a very solid team from Jones Day. Eric Berlin was leading that team. And so he clicked in right when I clicked out and just did a fantastic job of building out the group. And that group, I hired them when I was at Canopy, has done groundbreaking work to get companies that are cannabis adjacent listed on NASDAQ, staying listed on NASDAQ. Like they've really been pushing the envelope. So they were happy to have me back in the fold. And then Dentons is a huge firm, obviously, but while I was gone, my partners in the Bay Area have ascended to, US and global positions. And so it's really the same team I'm stepping back into. They've been kind of with me the whole way, and they were happy to have me back. And it's just been really fun.
Well, it does sound like you're having a lot of fun. Would you ever consider going back in-house again at some point? I'm probably not right away, but would you ever entertain that as a possibility?
I wouldn't count it out. I'd say that if it would have to be just the absolute right fit and the right timing. Timing's kind of everything. I do get very excited about being so close to the business. That is one thing I miss because you're not talking to the COO every day. You're not out there in the weeds with the teams. And so if there was an opportunity to drive a business, I wouldn't necessarily count it out.
Do you think the in-house experience has really helped you, be a better lawyer now as an outside? I mean, do you feel like you really have a lot more insight?
No, there's no question. And I remember being a young associate with all the advice to, if you can second, like go be with the client, go see how they work. And when you're so busy being a firm lawyer, you're like, well, okay, when am I going to do that? But now that I've done it, there's no way to unsee the business once you see it.
Yeah.
And so just the way you approach problems, I'm not even saying like how you bill time. I was always good at billing time, but like
Yeah.
how you think about problems in a way that's gonna get to the heart of it. Like I was already a bit of a street fighter before, but now like there's no way I'm not going for the jugular of any problem because we have in-house, you've got no time, resources can be constrained. Now how capital moves, how quarters work, how earnings work. So when to spend money, when to not. So I feel like I'm much more understanding and empathetic to my clients, and I don't think I would have that had I not had exposure
Yeah.
to in-house.
Well, that's very cool, Kelly. I really appreciate your taking the time and sharing your experience with me. Not everyone can have the opportunity to go in-house and then go back to a law firm, so it's really great to hear about it, and I really appreciate your taking the time.
Of course, Richard. Thank you for having me.
This is Richard Hsu and Kelly Fair. Thanks.